And we're live, Your Worship.
Thank you, Dina. Good evening. We'll call this meeting to order. I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Not seeing any. If at some point throughout the meeting you find that you do, please declare it at that time. Deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We have 2 public meetings and a presentation. Our first public meeting is the proposed 2022 water and wastewater rates. And before I read my preamble, I'll just look to Madam Clerk. Did we have anyone registered to speak for this evening?
We did have that, however, they've withdrawn, so we don't have any currently signed up to speak tonight.
For any of the items or just this one?
That's correct, for any items.
Okay, thank you. Notice of this public meeting was published in the Wasaga Sun newspaper on October 28th, 2021, and was posted on the town's website. The purpose of this meeting is to explain to the public the factors that are considered when establishing the water and wastewater rates and to outline the proposed new rates for 2022. Staff are here tonight to review and explain the details of the updated water wastewater rate study for 2022 that was undertaken in October. Shannon Stewart, our Deputy Treasurer, is here to present the water rate study and answer questions that members of the public may have. Shannon, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Fulci. Good evening, members of council, staff, and public viewers. I'm just going to share my screen here. The right one. Okay, can everyone see the presentation? Okay,
That's good.
so I am going to go through the 2022 water wastewater rates update. The purpose of the water wastewater rate study is to review the activity levels and financial needs of the water wastewater system and determine if there are any changes needed to the current rates. The town of Wasaga Beach has certain obligations under the Sustainable Water and Sewage Systems Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, including preparing and approving a plan that reviews the full cost of providing the water and wastewater services, outlining how it intends to pay for those services, and maintaining a dedicated reserve account for revenues allocated to the cost recovery plan to pay for the full cost of providing water and wastewater services, including but not limited to operating costs and capital renewal and replacement costs. The water wastewater system is self-sustaining. This means the funds generated from the water wastewater rates are used to maintain the system and help pay for future replacement and maintenance of the assets. The review looks at how much is required for future operations and asset management to ensure the system remains financially sustainable, and whether changes to the wastewater and water rates are required to meet those needs. It's important to know that no profit is generated for the town from the water and wastewater rates. Any funds collected in excess of the current year operating costs are held in the dedicated water and wastewater reserves as mandated by the province in order to meet the long-term financial needs of the system. The rate structure is considered adequate when it provides for the building of reserves to meet future replacement requirements, maintenance on the existing infrastructure as needed. It covers the annual operating costs and leads to a financially sustainable system. There are specific factors that are considered during the review. The largest influence comes from the number of users. We also look at wages and benefits from the council-approved salary grid and union contracts, the Ontario Clean Water Agency contract, utility costs, asset replacement requirements, and inflation rates. During the review process, the following steps are taken. A detailed review of the current users, and this includes a forecast for new users. We start with the total current users, which for 2021 are 13,016. This is up from 12,861 in 2020. We then forecast expected new users based on predictions of new homes in the most recent development charges study. We analyze consumption patterns, and this involves calculating the average consumption levels. The average for a single family home in 2021 was 184 cubic meters. There's a review of the revenues and operational costs of the system. Revenues come from the base charge and consumption charge. And we look at operational costs for both the water and wastewater systems. It's important to understand the needs of the system in terms of renewal and replacement. We review the inventory of the system and consider replacements based on the normal expected life of each asset. We review the Ontario Clean Water Agency's asset inventory recommendations. Under their recommendations, the largest replacement and upgrade years began in 2021, with approximately $33 million in investments required over the next 10 years. Given that the non-residential building CPI has increased from 2.2% at the end of 2020 to 11.6% in the third quarter of 2021, we have to watch this trend and how it will affect the predicted long-term capital costs. Finally, within the steps of the review, using the rates calculated and the asset replacement requirements, we forecast the reserves required to meet the system needs. For 2022, the proposed rate increase are 2% for the base rates and 2% for the consumption rates. And the rate increases are proposed to take effect in January 1st, 2022. This proposed increase will provide for existing maintenance costs, will compensate for the increase in costs anticipated in the 10-year forecast, will assist in maintaining contributions to the life cycle reserve, and will help with future sustainability. This chart provides a comparison between the town's proposed 2022 rates and our comparators, 2022 rates and the 2021 rates. It's split between the base rate and the annual consumption. In 2021, the base rate is $369.19, and it moves to $376.56, an increase of $7.37 annually. And the consumption for 2021, with an average usage of 184 cubic meters, comes to $193.20, and that moves up to $196.88 in 2022 for an increase of $3.68. The total change in the two rates is $11.05 annually, or 92 cents per month. This chart provides a comparison between the town's proposed 2022 rates and our comparators' 2021 rates. For Collingwood, the difference is $423.88. Clearview Township is higher by $595.44. Midland is higher by $388.52, and Penetanguishene $485.16. So the proposed rates, even with the 2% increase, are substantially below the rates of our comparators. This graph shows the forecasted balances for the water and wastewater reserves, respectively, over the next 10 years. You'll see that as we complete the needed capital projects for the wastewater system, including sewer upgrades, over the next 6 to 10 years, we'll be drawing on the related reserve balances for them. As the projects are completed, there's a slow climb to replenish the balances. This replenishment is key as we look forward to the large water main and sewer replacement and renewal costs predicted to start around 2059 and continue for the 10 to 20 years after that. It's a part of maintaining a sustainable system. These last three slides show the proposed residential rates, non-residential rates, lifestyle, condominium, and flat rate construction charges. Starting with this slide are the residential rates. The monthly base charge for a single family residence is $14.43 for water and $16.95 for wastewater. The consumption rates per cubic meter are 41 cents for water and 66 cents for wastewater. These rates are reflected in the water wastewater rate study. For the non-residential rates, for the 3/4 inch size service, the monthly base charges are $14.43 and for water and $16.95 for wastewater. The consumption rates per cubic meter are 41 cents for water and 66 cents for wastewater. These are the same as the residential rates for this size service, but starts to increase as the service size increases. The final slide in this presentation shows the lifestyle condominium rates and the flat rate construction rate charges. The lifestyle condominium monthly base rate is $10.84 for water, and the wastewater base rate is $12.70. The consumption rates are the same as the residential rates at 41 cents and 66 cents per cubic meter. The flat rate construction rate monthly water base rate is $18.48 and the wastewater is $21.91, and there are no consumption rates for this class. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, we are required under the Sustainable Water and Sewage Systems Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act excuse me, to ensure that we are operating our water and wastewater systems in a responsible and financially sustainable manner. We have an obligation to our system users to make sure that we meet those requirements. And looking toward the next year, this means increasing the water and wastewater base and consumption rates by 2%. In conducting this review and making our recommendations, we do not take these responsibilities lightly, but do our best to make sure that we can provide municipal water and wastewater services that will continue to meet the needs of our community in a financially sustainable way. And this concludes the water wastewater presentation on the proposed rate changes.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. We've already established that no one registered to speak today. So with that, I will ask members of council if they have any questions or comments with regard to the study and new rates. If I could just get the presentation taken down, then I can see everybody on my screen. Okay, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is actually a really good news study for us, and if you'll indulge me a little bit, when we went back and originally years ago we had a fixed rate. I think it was $110 a quarter, and and you could use as much water as you want. So when this was established, they found a balance between the base rate and the consumption rate, and so it spread if it was all based on the base rate, it would benefit the full-time residents, and if it was all based on the consumption rate, it would be a real benefit for the cottagers. So this balances it. It also has an environmental impact in that it encourages people not to waste water. So that's why it's good to have that. People from time to time ask me about the why we have the two rates. If you look at our costs versus our competitors or our comparators around us, one of the things we have is a pretty tight community where our infrastructure is all less than 50 years old, and so you go, that's one of the reasons we have a relatively low rate. But the other part is with Aqua doing our water, and we've got this prudent management that's created these reserves so that as our infrastructure ages and starts to fail, if you will, we have the reserves for it, and that's exactly what they're for. So I look and I go, when I'm looking at this, as we grow, there's new infrastructure required for new residents, but again, we have this balancing piece, and so again, this $11.05 or whatever it is on average, you go, well, that's it's going to go up because costs of everything are going up, and as mentioned by our deputy treasurer there. But I just think this is a good news story, and it shows prudent management of the asset going on. So I thank you for bringing it. I think it's a good way to go forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just, when I looked at the chart, this is just one more factor on the affordability of living in Wasaga Beach. We're one of the lowest water and sewer rates. We are one of the lowest in the province with our hydro electricity rates, and we're one of the lower ones in our region for municipal taxes. This all adds up to a very nice lifestyle. I hear it from a lot of people that move from other areas, how much more reasonable it is here. And you add that with the dynamite lifestyle that we have with the water, the mountains and everything, it's pretty nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just further to Councillor Watson's comments, I would say I don't believe we've seen any of the new census data, but I always reinforce at the last census that the average age of our residency is 6 years older than the provincial average, and our average family income is 18% below. And some of our neighboring municipalities are above the provincial average. But with that said, I want to acknowledge that through COVID, there's been many businesses and many of our residents that have struggled. But when it comes to water, and when we look at some of what's happened in both Canada and the US, when we don't take care of our water supply, I certainly support this modest increase to ensure that we can maintain a very high quality of water. And I think most people that I talk to would indicate that the water in Wasaga Beach is excellent. And to our public works and to OCA, they have continually scored extremely high in our ongoing inspection process. So I think this is an investment well made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will say a full copy of this study and tonight's PowerPoint presentation will be placed on the town's website for viewing by the public. This meeting is now closed, and we will move to the proposed 2022 general rates and fees public meeting. Notice of the public meeting was published in the Wasaga Sun newspaper on October 28th, 2021, and was posted on the town's website. The purpose of this public meeting is to explain to the public the changes being proposed to various rates and fees for a number of services that are provided by the town that will be considered by council. Information highlighting the major changes will be presented by the Deputy Treasurer, Shannon Stewart. I'll pass it to you again, Shannon.
Okay, thank you again, Mayor Byfolchi, members of council, staff, and public viewers. During this public meeting, we're presenting the proposed fees and charges changes for the 2022 budget. I'm going to share my screen here. And can everyone see that? Okay. So on the screen is a table outlining the proposed changes, and I'll walk through each one of these. I've already presented the review of the most recent wastewater study and the proposed rate changes there, so I won't speak to those here. This chart on the screen is only showing fees and charges that have proposed changes to them, not the full schedule of fees and charges that is in the bylaw. So starting with Schedule D, Municipal Law Enforcement, Licensing and Parking, under their sign bylaw fees, there are a few changes. The directional sign renewal is moving from $25 to $50. The A-frame sign application is moving from $25 to $50 per permit. A small sign return fee is moving from $2 per sign to $5 per sign. The standard or billboard signs non-digital from $125 per sign to $200 per sign. The standard or billboard signs digital, $150 per sign to $350 per sign. There are some new fees being added for awning signs, $100 per sign, wall signs, $150 per sign, projecting or overhead signs non-digital, $100 per sign, projecting or overhead signs digital, $150 per sign, ground sign, $150 per sign, a mobile sign, $50 per permit, variance granted fee, $100 per sign, and residential home occupation signs, $100 per permit. The on-building signs non-digital and the on-building signs digital are being removed from the schedules. Under Schedule G for the public library, overdue book fines are being removed. Under Schedule K for development charges, the development charges have been indexed in accordance with the Development Charges Act using the rates at the most recent development charges, or using the most recent development charges study and the prescribed rate, which is the non-residential building cost index of 11.6%. Under the Public Works Department, Water, Sewer, and Drains, we have water and sewer service calls after hours moving from a 2-hour minimum to a 3-hour minimum charge. Water turn off and turn on after hours from $150 each to $170 each. Residential water meters, 19 millimeter diameter from $205 to $220. A 25 millimeter from $250 to $265. Water meter transmitter from $155 to $170. A Vector truck rental after hours from a 2-hour minimum to a 3-hour minimum. And CCTV cameras after hours from a 2-hour minimum to a 3-hour minimum. They have also added the memorial and dedication program. A bench is $2,000 each. Trees are $500 each. A single bike rack, $250 each. A 5-bike rack, $900 each. A 10-bike rack, $1,400 each. And a plaque, including an inscription, for a bench is $330 each, and for a tree would be $100 each. In addition to the changes noted, Schedule A currently shows a rental fee for the classroom. This room is no longer available for rent, and so this charge will be removed as well, and it will be reflected in the bylaw that will be brought to council on November 23rd. And there are no other proposed changes on this part of the rates and fees schedule, as the wastewater rates were already addressed. So that is the end of this presentation.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. And again, as mentioned earlier, no one registered from the public to speak at this meeting. So I will go to council members. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple things, and I was in to see the treasurer, so I appreciate that they changed the classroom rental. I also just want to point out that I was concerned about the memorial bench cost. It seemed huge, to be honest with you, because you could get one at the parks for, I believe, $600 right now, including an inscription, although they're full. But Kevin got back to me from Public Works to say it actually isn't a profit center. It's just that's what the cost of the bench is. So even though I thought it was outrageous, it is. And he showed me the invoices for it. So it is what it is. The other part too, I have a concern. And again, I know we talk about this every year, and certainly with COVID, we're still in a recovery phase. So I see all these sign ones going in for businesses in town, and I think there's a lot of them. and so the first thing is, is there any grandfathering? So if a business has an existing awning right now, let's do a real estate company near me, for example, they haven't had to pay for that. Is that now going to be a cost to them? So that's the one part, is the grandfathering. And then if not, then it's not necessarily fair to all businesses. But the other part is, if we are going to impose these fees, I'd perhaps be a little more comfortable if we were to cut every one of those new fees in half. That's my own thought. I've opened it up to discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I'll look to Shannon. I'm assuming that you've done reviews and you're bringing forward these fees based on information that you've gathered. Can you speak to what Councillor Foster's raised?
So I did review the reports that were behind these new fees, but I don't think that I would be the right person to speak to them right now, and whether there would be any grandfathering. I am not sure if we have someone from bylaw here that could speak to that.
Oh, there's Rachel.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was waiting for my part there. A couple points there. The grandfathering one, I personally did not think of yet. So I think you bring up a great point, Councillor Foster. In terms of the rates that we have increased, a lot of them are the new ones just based on municipalities that we researched, and to review to review like our new sign bylaw that came out. So a lot of them are just new ones that have been implemented, and we did look at other municipalities in the surrounding areas and others that have tourist-based communities, just to make sure that we're reflecting those. We also, the last area of increase that I did see was from 2016. I hope I'm correct there. So it was just more so to basically reflect that we have not done a large increase for any of our fees and rates in terms of signs for quite a few years. And I think that was the last point there, just that we also just researched other municipalities just to make sure that we were reflecting on other communities and what they're doing as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster?
Sorry, just on a follow-up, and although that's well and good, our businesses are established here. They don't necessarily have the luxury of going to other tourist-based. I do appreciate you looked at tourist-based communities. I do appreciate that, but I'm still, again, I realize COVID is hopefully near the end, but I would be willing to, look at some modification of that for another year, but I'll leave it to the wisdom of our team and staff to bring that forward. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you. Just with regards to the increases to the sign bylaw, they're 100% increase. We might not have had one for a couple of years, but unless we're going to be using that money to enforce appropriate usage of the signage that people are getting permits for, I'm not really sure why we're increasing the fee. We came out with a new sign bylaw. I haven't seen any active enforcement of that new sign bylaw, but I'm now seeing penalties for business who want to try to follow the sign bylaw. So I'm just struggling with the logic here of 100% increases to fees.
Okay, Rachel?
Thank you. Keep in mind too, with the sign bylaw, we are giving a grace period of 2 years before people have to be in compliance. We already have measures in place to ensure that we are providing letters and educational pieces of anyone who has a current sign that might not have been in the previous bylaw to get a permit for. But in regards to the permits and everything, I think it would be, appropriate even for what Council Foster suggested, that if someone, say, has an awning sign, to possibly look at grandfathering it or to charge a renewal fee rather than an application fee until it's, a couple years in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blanchet?
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to Councillor Foster's comments, I was going to suggest, given COVID and the fact that we have had some business departures in our community, and I know that a number of businesses are struggling, I would be much more in favor of creating the new categories, but putting off any additional charges or increases until next year. I'll leave it for others to comment on that. I do have comments on the development charges later. So, thank you.
Sorry, my mute button was stuck. Did you have anything to add on that, Rachel?
No, I don't think so. I certainly appreciate your comment, and if it needs to be taken back for staff to make some edits, I am completely open to that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster?
Sorry to keep hammering this, Your Worship, but I believe I heard that it's 2 years before there would be really enforcement of the new sign bylaw. And so, in other words, I could put up a sign and be in violation of it for 2 years, or I could pay $150 for a sign for the next 2 years. I think they need to be in sync. So again, I see the use for it. I appreciate the new sign bylaw, but I do think staff need to have another quick look at this, and I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And before I open it up for any further questions, I'm just looking at Mr. CAO or perhaps Shannon, as far as our motion that I would be reading, it would basically be sending it to council on November 23rd as is. So is it your intent to take comments today and bring something revised to the 23rd meeting, or where do you see the suggestions of today going, Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. All good comments, certainly things for staff to reflect on. I just wanted to make the point with respect to the fees that are before you. These are fees that staff have reviewed and brought forward and are reflective, for the most part, of the cost of doing business in terms of administering these programs. As council is aware, in 2020 and 2021, as separate measures in support of business, council did suspend provisions with respect to temporary signs, and council does have that ability to be able to do that if it feels that it's a way to support business. So my point there, Your Worship, is with respect to the fees, if council views the fees as being reasonable, then they could proceed. However, as a separate action, if council deems it appropriate that wants to offer some relief on a temporary basis to encourage local business, that's something that could be done as a separate motion or a separate action.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blanchet.
Yes, to the CAO, through Your Worship, would that be a charge that could go back to the funding that we've received from the province? Is that eligible?
CAO.
Your Worship, I don't know the answer to that question. Our treasurer has reviewed the rules with respect to the use of the COVID grant extensively, and I would defer to her.
Okay, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. The COVID grant, if you set these fees into place, and these are going to be our normal fees that we would charge, then we would only have the COVID grant monies for if we did not, if we lost what we expected to get. Say our sign sales went down because we put these prices in and people can't afford those. So we would have that difference between what we budgeted in revenue for the signs versus what we actually receive in sign revenue, and that is what is COVID eligible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll look to see if there's any other questions for Shannon on her presentation. Councillor Blanchet.
Yes, I have a number of questions related to development charges, and the comment about indexing was unfamiliar to me. We've gone, my understanding, quite a number of years without increasing DC charges until recently. But my first question, I guess, would be to the treasurer. Have the proposed DC charges that are being proposed tonight, have they already been built into the revenue of the draft 2 budget?
Jocelyn.
Thank you, through Your Worship. So the development charge revenues go directly to our reserves, so they don't go into the budget per se as revenues until such time as they are used. And the DC indexing, that's part of the Development Charges Act, and we have indexed the rates every year on January the 1st, and it's prescribed in the Act that we use the most current non-residential construction index. So that's what we have used to index that.
Okay, so to follow up, have we used these proposed changes to increase our reserves in the forecast for 2022?
Through your worship, that process is still in place. We haven't finished doing this, the forecast that we are doing for our reserves. So we haven't done anything at this time yet with those rates, but those are the rates that we would be using once the forecast is updated.
Okay, I have a little bit of confusion because on November 12th, 2020, Hempson Consulting presented to council a development charge increase that was recommended at 52%. And at that time, we had indicated that we had gone a significant period of time without increasing our rates. The proposed rate for a single detached home at that time was $31,212. And council expressed some concern at the level of that increase. And in fact, on the December 15th CAL meeting, we discussed phased in options. And then on January 21st CAL meeting, council on a vote of 6-1 decided to implement those DC charge increases at 75% in May of this year, and the remaining 25% to be in January 2022. Subsequent to that, the formulas and the justification for the increase from Hampton Consulting was challenged by a developer on 2 occasions. And in both cases, the rate was reduced from the recommended. And in fact, I believe maybe Doug Heron could confirm, but I believe the rates are currently under appeal. So then we move to the rate suggested tonight has moved to $32,703. And the recommendation from Hanson was $31,212, and I believe the 2 challenges reduced that rate by almost $5,000. So, which maybe is the 27 to the 32,703. I calculate that at 18.55%. But again, I distinctly remember when council approved this, that we had indicated that we hadn't had a DC charge increase in over 5 years. And now I'm being told we're indexing it every year. So I'm somewhat confused at how we moved from the Hanson rate challenged and reduced on 2 occasions to now a rate greater than what was proposed by Hanson Consulting. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, Jocelyn and Mr. CO, I did see your card up, so if there's something relevant to this conversation, we'll go to Jocelyn and then put your card up again and I'll go to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So our rates that were established, every 5 years we do a DC study, and that is where the new rates get established. And then each year those rates are indexed based on that construction rate indexing formula. So that's part of the Development Charges Act. It happens in 5-year cycles, and that's what we've done here. So when Hempson proposed the rates for January 1st, 2022, there was a reference, I believe, in the study and possibly even on the chart itself that said subject to indexing as per the Development Charges Act. So this is a standard process that goes through. The study determines what the rates should be for the next 5-year period, and then the indexing is done once a year to keep up with the increased costing that's occurring in those years based on construction.
Just through you, Your Worship, to the Treasurer, the proposed single detached increase of 5,118, if we said the index was 11%, 10% would be $2,758 increase. And we have a $5,118 increase.
Through Your Worship, to answer that, I'd have to actually have that chart in front of me, and I don't right at the moment have it. Perhaps I could come back with an answer in responding to your questions there, because I don't have those numbers specifically to look at. Okay,
Well,
are you referencing one of the charts in the meeting tonight?
yes, that was the proposed changes that Shannon showed.
Okay, perhaps I could come back still. I'll let,
Well, just through you, your worship, if we're going to vote on this, this has to be clarified. So,
Well, and I've heard a few suggestions tonight, so I don't know that we're actually going to get there tonight. So,
okay, thank you.
if Jocelyn, like if we have the chart and we can put it up on the screen and Jocelyn's able to answer it, that's great. But if not, I certainly don't want to rush an answer and it not be perhaps accurate. I want to make sure that we have the right information.
Perhaps, Shannon, if you have, do you have the chart available that you could share your screen?
So you can see the chart there, Jocelyn?
Yes, I'm just looking for the amount. Councillor Belanger, if you would please reiterate your question.
I'm just used the example of the top line for singles and semis. So the current rate of 27,000 and change, and you're saying that it's indexed by 11%, but it's saying the increase is $5,118. That's significantly higher than 11%.
So I do see your question now, and now given that, I would like to, I have to come back to you. I have to go back now and review those numbers to see why that, to be able to respond to that. I don't have an answer for you right at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we can have that taken down. Okay, Councillor Watson?
Just throwing this out, I'm wondering if it's because we are now going to the full rate, the other 25% as of January 1st. That would probably bring that up, that amount. That would be my thought on it.
That's kind of what I was thinking, but again, I want to make sure whatever answers are shared, that we're 100% that is accurate.
So through your worship, if I could just verify that, I think you are correct, Councillor Watson, but I do agree that I should go back and verify those numbers.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on Shannon's presentation? Okay, so I guess I'm looking to council because we have a motion in our agenda that would see us moving these rates and fees forward. They would come to council on November 23rd for approval, final approval. Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Worship, and I've been listening, and I'm of the thought process possibly we should be asking it going back to staff to clarify some of the issues that Councillor Belanger came up with. I'm also not overly content with the signage portion of it either. So that's only my thoughts, Your Worship. I give them out to council for theirs.
Okay, thank you. And I see cards going up. I'm just looking to Mr. CAO. I know that the deadline for coordinated committee would be tight in order to get this on it. Is that possible, or what are you thinking as far as bringing anything further forward?
Thank you, Worship. I think that with respect to the questions pertaining to development charges, we could just go back to the development charge bylaw that was enacted in April of earlier this year and just confirm the figures. So that should be pretty straightforward. I'm not completely sure in terms of what other matters members of council may be interested in finding some more information. Today's Wednesday. The agenda goes out Thursday or Friday, I should say. So I think there is an opportunity if council wanted to refer this back to staff to bring a report forward to a coordinated committee. Even if, Your Worship, we may have to have a document to follow. Maybe it gets circulated on Monday so that, council has a fulsome report when it considers the matter again at coordinated committee.
Okay, thank you. And I see some people nodding to that. I saw Councillor Foster and Councillor Wells' cards, I believe.
That was going to be my suggestion, is that we refer it back to coordinated committees.
Okay, and Councillor Foster, you were the same? Okay. All right, so Madam Clerk, do we have to pass a motion for that, or are we just referring it back?
I believe this is just a public meeting on the fees, that we're not approving any fees today, so certainly staff have taken the direction.
Okay, so because I haven't read the motion that's in the agenda, because there is a motion in the agenda with regard to this public meeting.
Yes, the public meetings for input, implement the fee increases. I see what you mean.
And then further, yeah, there's another piece to that indicates that it be considered by council November 23rd. So if I don't read that motion, do we have ask for a mover and seconder to refer this back to staff to bring to the coordinated committee?
We can certainly do that.
Okay, can I have a mover and seconder for that, please? So Councillor Foster and Councillor Kinney, all those in favor? And those opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. And thank you, Shannon. So that public meeting is now closed. And we will move on to item 3.3, a presentation for the 2022 operating and capital budget draft 2. And I will just note, I think what we'll do is have this presentation, but I will not read this motion until we have had our in-camera discussion later on, as it could have an impact on that motion. So with that, I will pass it over to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. So I'll just start by sharing my screen to show the documents for the draft 2 budget changes. So just give me a moment here. So the staff report for draft 2 of the 22 budget outlines changes that are made in the budget from draft 1 to draft 2 and the impact that it has on taxation. And during this discussion, I'll provide a walkthrough of these changes. So at the first budget meeting of October 7th, staff presented a draft 1 budget with a proposed tax rate percentage increase of 2.15%. At that time, the municipal comparator chart, which I'll just scroll down to, and that's the chart I'm referring to. It showed that even with the proposed 22 tax rate increase, the town's 22 rate would still be on the lower end of the tax rates when compared with similar municipalities' 21 tax rates. So through recent discussions with other municipalities, it has been suggested that other municipalities may be considering a tax rate increase in the range of 3 to 3.7% for 2022. And recently I've even heard some higher rates than that. So I'm just going to now stop sharing this screen for a moment and move to another one. And could I just confirm that you can see on the screen the summary of draft 2 changes?
No, I see a sailboat.
All right, so that, just give me a moment then, please.
I see where I want to be.
Let's try this again. I just have to get a certain screen before it will share. Okay. Do you see that now?
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you very much for waiting for that. Okay, so these are the tax rate changes that have been made and some of the other changes that don't impact taxation as well. So these represent changes from draft 1 to draft 2. And at the end of each of the sections I go through, I'll ask if there's any questions. And then at the end of this report, there is a section on staffing, and we could have conversations on staffing questions at that time. I think that might be a little easier. So to start with, I'd just like to point out that increases on here are represented in brackets, and decreases do not have brackets on them. So sorry, just one moment. The starting taxation impact from draft 1 is we started with 25,413,000. And this chart is going to show you down at the bottom here, we're going to get to 25,376,000, and that's about a $36,000 decrease. So that's what these changes represent. So I'll begin with general government, and the corporate initiatives line item was reduced to offset a cost that was added to the capital budget. And we also, for the Conservation Authority line, increased that to agree with the levy information that has been provided by MBCA. Under the beachfront rental income, it has been decreased to align with the current leases and other line items that have been adjusted to revised estimates. We also added back in the affordable housing budget, as there is still a leased premise. And some of the election costs were increased, and some of the cemetery costs were added. And then we have revised estimates for the interest and the debentures, which resulted in decreased taxation needs. And then there is a proposed cost added for $12,000 for website software maintenance. So that is the changes for the general government section. Are there any questions for that section?
Okay, any questions from council? Seeing none, carry on please, Jocelyn.
Thank you. So now we'll move down to the community services. And again, we have some revised estimates. The policing costs have decreased, and the community policing budget has been added back in for just the line items that were support services that we had previously. And to help offset some of the increased staffing costs related to the amount of the new arena position, there was phase-in that was in the budget in draft 1, and we've reduced that by $13,000 a little bit to offset the new staffing. A cost saving was realized when we removed a software license that is not required in the youth center. And the events budget has new staffing position as well. And this has been funded from reserves for 2022, as we had moved some surplus funds from 2020 into the reserve to assist with the startup again of the event program. So that for 1 year is through the reserves. The library increased their cost when adding in the RFID supplies and revised estimates and the addition of a hotspot data plan. With additional staffing added for the library, the phase-in contribution to reserve for the new library operating cost also was reduced to offset the new cost. So we have the $14,000 there. So those are the main changes to the community services budgets. Are there any questions for this group?
Okay, thanks, Jocelyn. And before I open it up, this section spoke with regard to staff. So I would just like to remind council members, if it's a specific position or an identifiable individual, that is something that we would discuss in camera and not in this part of the meeting. Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the treasurer, just the 70,800 related to events that is going to be supported from reserves. Is that equal to the amount that was put into reserves?
Through your worship, that amount is quite a bit less than what was put to reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Jocelyn at this stage? Seeing none, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Thank you. Okay, so under the Public Works section, we have a revised estimate that increases the Transit Ontario gas tax grant and the addition of new staff for the water wastewater program. The water wastewater program changes are funded through the water wastewater reserves and does not impact taxation, but these figures are offset further down in the report within the staffing figures. And the change is presented here just to highlight a staffing change within the Public Works Department. And that is all of the changes for Public Works. Are there any questions for Public Works?
Questions? Seeing none, carry on, Jocelyn, please.
Thank you. Under Planning and Development, there is a small adjustment for the Building Department, which is a self-sustaining department. And as well, under the Planning Department is adding a new staffing position to help offset the cost. A couple of the planning project initiatives that are one-time activities, we have funded those through the reserve, and this allowed for taxation funding to be allocated to the new position. As well, a revised carryover estimate was updated for the official plan update. And those are the changes for the Planning and Development section. Are there any questions for that section?
Okay, questions for Jocelyn? Seeing none.
Okay. And now at the bottom of this is where we have the full cost of the staffing changes. And for new employees, we have 512,000, and contract employees, we have 55,000, and some of the other items here. So these are the total changes that are incorporated into the draft 2 budget. And this is where I thought an appropriate time would be if there were any questions regarding staffing.
Sorry, my mute button keeps sticking. I guess my only comment would be is that prior to draft 3 coming forward, I would hope, and I'll say this through the CAO, is that all staffing requests are double checked. Who's doing what? Do we have right people in right positions and all of those things? But again, I think any identifiable or staffing issues at this point need to go in camera. So if it's something like that, it'll have to wait for in camera. But if there's a general comment or question for Jocelyn about staffing at this point, then now would be the appropriate time for that. If there's any. Councillor Belanger?
Yes, I take it that when we're discussing new positions, that is not something that has to be in camera because it wouldn't be an identifiable individual. But being this is a public meeting, a substantial amount of the increase has to do with positioning our planning department to handle the significant workload that comes along with not only being a fast-growing community, but some of the significant projects that we're currently undertaking. So I don't know if Doug, if it would be appropriate for him maybe to explain just a little bit to the public related to that. I believe it's important and certainly support the investment given the workload that we're faced with in that department. Thank you.
Doug? Mr. Herron, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of factors affecting the work level in the department, there are some standards that we can measure against from previous years. For instance, pre-consultation applications where developers will come to the planning department to understand what it would take to make a complete application. In all previous years, since we've been performing pre-consultations, we've had about 10 applications a year. Currently, in the current market, we have 23 applications that we are either ongoing or that we've completed this year. A similar story happens with bona fide planning applications that are being made to the town. The measure that we can make in terms of the number of planning applications is if we look at the revenue projection for this year. I think we are over $120,000 above what we had projected for revenue for planning fees, which is a significant number. In past years, we've typically come in almost within 5% less than what we projected. So it gives an indication of the level of development that we're currently seeing on the implementation side of planning. When it comes to the policy side of planning, the town is at that stage where it's changing from suburbia to a full growth municipality. So we are having to update our policies significantly to attend to that urbanized type of growth. And when you relate the creation and the hours it takes to create those policies in tandem with the county, what's also affected the work time is that the Planning Act has been amended significantly over the past 3 to 4 years. And the work that's required to go into any planning application has increased because of the requirements of the Planning Act. And the timeframes have been reduced because of the requirements of the Planning Act. So what that has resulted in is quite a condensing of the number of hours that we have to apply as staff to each application. And what we project in that going forward, we don't see a slowdown. We anticipate that the town will continue to be identified as a high growth municipality through every 5-year census going forward to 2051. We see that we will start to see a lot more internal type developments, which take a lot more work. So that's where you have developments that are not on the fringes of the town, but are in the core of the town. And with those types of developments, it takes a lot more work just because you have immediate neighbors who have concerns that we have to address. So on a number of different levels of how we perform, we are finding a struggle to find enough hours, notwithstanding the fact that we are short-staffed right now, and staff are working double time just to make up for that. So going forward, we anticipate that there is going to be quite a push for development and creation of new policy to address that development.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you. Jocelyn?
All right, thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just going to share my screen again now. And on the screen, you should be able to see the capital budget summary of draft 2 changes. Is that what's showing? Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. So the draft 1 capital budget amount that's through taxation is 2.8 million. And that will move under draft 2 to 2.9 million. And that's an increase of about $96,000. So looking at what's changed under general government, we have equipment that was added for the communications budget in the amount of $5,000. We also have moved the security cameras out of the admin budget and down into the information technology budget. And there's an additional camera that was removed from the beachfront budget and a new piece of equipment for the cemetery that was removed out of capital and into grounds maintenance operating budget. And we have carryover amounts from 2021 that were updated for the municipal law enforcement. So are there any questions about the changes in the general government section?
Okay. Any questions on that portion? Seeing none, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Thank you. So under community services, we have adjustments to the revenue and expenses for the aerial platform truck as the financial plan for this item was changed and the purchase was made in 21. So we've now adjusted for that in draft 2. The arena equipment refrigeration line item was moved out of the capital and into the operating budget. And other allocations took place in the library budget as well. So those are the only changes under community services. And do we have any questions?
Any questions on that? Seeing none, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Thank you. Moving on to public works. We had some adjustments made for the day labor project, and those additional funds were taken from reserve. And we have revised estimates and carryover amounts were adjusted for a few of the roads projects. So we have a couple of the projects there being adjusted. We've also added the biosolids complex upgrades project that's been put in draft 2. And the storm drainage projects, we have carryover amount that was revised, that reducing the amount. We have also removed the cycle track project that was added in draft 1. And we are now carrying over the stockroom renovation into the 2022 year. So those are the changes in the public works section. Do we have any questions on public works?
Okay, questions, Deputy Mayor Bray?
I just wondered the cycle track removal. I just wondered if why it was removed, because I think it was certainly something many of us saw as a great addition to the town.
Agreed. Jocelyn?
If I could, through your worship, defer this to Kevin Lalonde.
Okay. Kevin?
Thank you, worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Bray. Really, it was a function of trying to assist with meeting taxation targets. We haven't had any further dialogue with the individual that had tabled this from the outset. And, you know, when we first created the first draft, it was my hopes that, you know, we would add some incentive for him to continue with his efforts in terms of supporting this project. However, we've yet to hear anything further from Mr. McKavicus. So we're certainly willing to put it back in, and even if it doesn't advance, public works staff could pursue that through our own efforts. But this was really just removed in an effort to reduce that taxation impact.
Follow up?
So thank you. So I guess if he does come forward, we can revisit it at that point, because we can always look mid-year if we need to, right?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we've already indicated that our willingness to support the initiative through whether it's excavation or fill material, because he has realized that there's additional removal efforts needed beyond his original proposal and scope of work. So we certainly have already initiated the dialogue in terms of town partnerships. But absolutely, if there's no pursuit on his part, then we can come forward with material. Really, that cost was to cover the costs of the screenings and the material. It wasn't to include the asphalt even at that point, but we can come back with a report if it doesn't advance any further and look to draw from reserves or some other accounts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells?
Same questions, same answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything on that portion? Okay, Jocelyn?
Thank you. We just have to change screens. Okay, can you see the blue chart on the screen now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to just highlight a few other items related to the budget. And for the 22 draft 2 budget, it represents a low increase in the levy as compared to prior years. So what I would like to show to you, and I just need to move something on my screen here, there. What I'd like to show you is the amount of levy that is being increased in 2022 is about 1.2 million. And if we look at the past years, you'll see back in 2020, our increase in levy, which is revenue, taxation revenue to the town, it was about $2 million in that year. So relative to past years, we are increasing our budget a lot less than we typically have done. We also have down here in the red line, the blended tax rate percentage increase. And this is the increase that taxpayers actually experience on their tax bill. And you can see in 2022, it's 2.61%. And in prior years, it was 1.71 and about 0.5% and almost nothing in 2019. But while the percentage rate has gone up, the amount of tax revenue we're actually getting is less. And the reason for that partly is to do with some of the county increase that's happening, as well as the assessment rates that have been frozen, the assessment growth that's frozen, that is having an impact in making the tax rate percentage higher, even though we aren't getting more dollars. So when we look at the blended rate, you see we're at 2.61%. So it was important, I think, to understand that we aren't increasing our budget by a lot of revenue dollars from taxation, but our percentage increase has gone up. And there are also some other factors that are important to take note of at this time, and that's what's happening to the cost factors driving the budget. If you look at inflation over the past few years, you can see we're running now at close to 4%, and whereas we typically are closer to 2%. And the non-residential price index, it was 3.3 in 2019 and 2.5 in 2020. Now it's up at 11.6. So these are some of the pressures that we're feeling as we're setting up the budgets for the different projects, particularly the construction-related projects. We've also had very substantial increases over the years in our insurance costs. And those, there's expectation those will continue into 2022 as well. And lastly, we also have adjusted our COLA increase to our union agreements recently processed. So all of these factors together give you some understanding that it's relatively a lower budget that's being presented, but with some very significant other factors that are impacting the budget for the town. So at this point, I'll just ask if there are any questions, and if not, I'll move on.
Okay, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't sure if Jocelyn was done or yet, so I'll let her finish, and then I may have some comments to offer. Thank you.
Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just want to express a general concern re our residency, and I referred to it earlier that we don't have the most latest census data out yet. But when we look at the increase in development charges and the impact it has on the cost of new homes, which then affects aftermarket, which then affects rents, and we look at many municipalities around us are indicating that affordable housing is at a crisis level. And when you look at the inflation rates that we deal with and that a local family has to deal with too, and even though we're doing a great job at managing our budget, there's a significant element of our community that is going further below the poverty line And I don't know if there's effective a way how we can address that, but there's a cost to that. There's a cost to mental illness and a cost to drug addiction or alcohol addiction. And we see not just in our community, but in all kinds of communities, these situations are becoming more desperate. And I don't know if at some point in time we really have to look at how we apply increases to individuals' ability to pay. And I just want all of council to reflect in all of our decisions is that for many of us, this is not a hardship, but for many within our community, what we're dealing with right now and what we're proposing is a deal breaker. So it's something that I think we need to discuss and become more creative about and have more initiatives to identify those issues and find solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you. Just further to Councillor Belanger's comment, the ability to pay is something that you mentioned, and it's certainly something that affects us as municipalities, because the province is responsible for things like firefighter arbitration, OPP cost. They maybe aren't responsible for insurance, but they could probably do something that would affect all 444 municipalities if they looked at insurance and maybe looked at a more fair or more equitable way to, 27% increases in 1 year, that it shouldn't be acceptable, but we have no choice. So I know at the county level, we have a regional government review, and there's a number of things being looked at to see where we can take costs out of the system. But I think we really have to keep putting pressure on the provincial government to just say, the ability to pay at the municipal level is really important. As you keep downloading responsibilities, we get the smallest share of those tax dollars. And it's really, really hard. I mean, luckily we're a growing municipality, but you think of these small northern ones that just can't, they can't afford 27% increases in their insurance. And this year, I think ours was under 10, but even still over 10%, that's huge when you're talking of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of insurance in a year. So just somehow, if we can continue to put pressure on Simcoe County or County of Simcoe, as well as the province, I think it's really, really important as we go through this budget.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm the chair of the Regional Government Review at the county, and we are looking at a number of different services that are provided and ways to reduce costs and work in the best interest of the residents of Simcoe County. Insurance is not on the list. County Council approved certain deliveries that we would review, and we're in the middle of that now. There's also AMO, there's other avenues to take, but I agree. I think the province, a lot of it's put down onto the municipalities to handle it, but a lot of it is stuff that they would need to back us in. And currently we don't have that backing from the province. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, Deputy Mayor Bray. Any other comments or questions for Jocelyn? Okay. Mr. CEO, is this where you wanted to add something, or are you talking the very end of Jocelyn's presentation?
Well, Jocelyn, I think, had some points to make further, and so I'll let her do that, and then we'll have some comments to make. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Jocelyn?
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I do just have a few other comments to make. Perhaps I'll just conclude that our proposed tax rate increase right now is 3.59%. That I just want to reiterate that we're still at the low end of our comparable municipalities. I think it's important that we understand where we are relative to others. And that chart is on page 5 of the staff report, if anybody is wanting to see the chart. And as noted in the staff report, also on page 2, there is a table that demonstrates for a home assessed at $450,000, The tax rate increase for the full year is projected at $93.20 for the municipal portion. And the total taxes when we have municipal, county, and education is projected at $117.82, which is a 2.61% overall tax rate increase. So I just thought I would highlight that those pieces of information are available in the staff report for our residents. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Worship. Just to summarize a bit, Jocelyn, in her report on page 2, or sorry, on page 1 of her report, she summarizes the changes that she outlined on her 2 schedules, the changes to the operating budget and changes to the capital budget. Of all those changes across the board, on page 1 at the bottom corner, it's a $59,370 change from draft 1. So all the changes up and down were at $59,370. The treasurer also goes on to the next page, and I'm going to ask her to elaborate a bit on the paragraph dealing with the assessment, because I think this is an important point. So as much as we've reduced the changes to 59,000, there's an assessment change that's having even a greater impact on our budget. And I'll just ask her to elaborate, and then I have some further comments to make. Thank you.
Okay, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, our tax rate change from draft 1 to draft 2 of the budget, the total change was 1.44% on the tax rate. But of that total change, 1.23% is because we had to adjust down our assessment base when the close of the roll came. And so we normally receive approximately 4% growth from one year to the next when we have phase in. Knowing that we weren't going to have phase in, we decreased our budget estimate forecast down to 2%. Our growth only came in at 1.93%, and this meant that we had to adjust down our assessment base from draft 1 to draft 2. And this is the impact that it had. While we only increased 59,000 total from draft 1 to draft 2, that would have only changed the tax rate by about 0.25%. But our tax rate changed by 1.5%. And that's because we did not have the assessment in the base that we were expecting. I believe that was what was wanted to be highlighted.
Right, and I think this goes back to the province, though. This is another provincial situation where MPAC is behind 18 months or something like that, and they need to get people working and doing this so that the municipalities can be collecting the money. George?
Yes, thank you. Just to elaborate on that. So, as you can see in our community, we're a fast-growing municipality. Just in water accounts alone, we added 155 new water accounts, and those tend to happen when a new unit gets occupied. And when those units get occupied, information goes to MPAC, and MPAC does an evaluation and adds the value of that new construction to the assessment roll. With COVID, MPAC got way behind in terms of adding new assessment to the roll. And in making some inquiries, they're running in excess of 1.5 years, 1.25 years behind in terms of adding new assessment to the roll. So that impacts municipalities such as Wasaga Beach, where we would have all those new houses that are being occupied added to the assessment to push our assessment growth, 2%, maybe a little over 2%. We're now at 1.23 because that's just not getting added to the roll. So there is a consequence. MPAC is now back in the field. They are doing inspections. They are adding new assessment, but the roll closed for 2021. The roll closed at the end of October. So there's no new assessment. The next assessment will be added in 2022. So just wanted to point that out, that the major cost driver for this part of the discussion is the change in what our estimated assessment growth forecast was. It's gone down based on the results of the assessment roll.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you. I think I got my answer, because obviously the numbers don't add up to the new building permits issued. But that's just because there's the time to build and then the delay in impact to registering.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, when you move into a new house, you do start paying taxes right away, don't you?
If I may, and we have our deputy treasurer on, and we have our treasurer, so they know a lot more about taxes than I do. So if I get this wrong, I'm sure they'll correct me. But yes, the building permits are only building permits. When a house is occupied, that's when typically they start to pay their water bills. And shortly thereafter, if MPAC is on top of things, which they were, then they get assessed and they're added to the roll. The tax department, this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me, they get a listing and they get added to the roll and they start paying taxes. So it's on occupancy. I'll let the treasurer, deputy treasurer, speak to the technical part of it, because I'm not that familiar with it.
Okay, so we'll pass it to you, Jocelyn. And just if you can also add to the answer, does that mean that the property owner themselves will eventually have to play catch up based on the occupancy, and will they get a large bill at some point?
So yes, in response to those questions, a taxpayer can get a large bill. We did have one for one of the recent development subdivisions that went in. They were asking for their tax supplementary bill. It came later, and they did receive a large bill that they had to adjust for. Also, it depends, if the taxpayer is paying the taxes directly themselves, or is it in their mortgage payment, as to when those taxes will start. So there are a few factors there, but the answer is yes. When the supplemental bill comes through, the taxpayer does get a larger bill, and that's when it impacts them.
Thank you. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. So either through you to the treasurer, to our CAO, when they finally do start catching up, then I'm assuming the municipality would get their back share of that. But there's two different issues. One is them not getting on the roll as quick as what they should, but the province has always also frozen the assessment increases on all housing for 2 years. Now that, again, is reflective to try to help those individuals that were financially negatively impacted through COVID. And certainly through the last 18 months, we've seen where the provincial government has provided support to municipalities. I don't know if it's more or less than what we've lost, but it's sort of a catch-22. We need to look after individuals that are struggling, but we also have to look after municipalities that struggle to meet their budgets. So it's hopefully, but my question is that when they do get on the roll and they have to pay back to the start of occupancy, then I'm assuming the municipality would be paid their full share. So even though we may not have got it in 2020, we may get that extra boost in 2021. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. We do eventually get those when they are processed through MPAC.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foster.
Same question, same answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? And Jocelyn, do you have more to present, or that was it?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as I indicated earlier, I'd like to hold this motion till after our in-camera session, just in case there's any discussion that comes out of there that would in any way affect that. So if we're okay with that, we will move on to new business, item 4.1, and that is dealing with the Conservation Authority budget. I do have a motion here, if I could have a mover and seconder. Councillor Foster, and Councillor Kinney. Resolved that Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee recommend to Council that it receive the Treasurer's report on the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority budget review for information, and further that Committee recommends including the requested NVCA levies in the 2022 budget at $240,049.56 for general levy and $12,476.04 for capital levy. Discussion. No discussion? Councillor Watson?
I guess I'd just like to point out it's one of a few categories where we as a municipality do not have control over these fees. The NVCA is one of them. Our OPP budget is another. County, the education levy. So when you break those out, our tax rate is quite a bit different. But these are ones that land on our plate, and we basically have to accept them going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, goes back to the province, and conservation authorities and things like that is one of the items under the planning review through the regional government review that is being looked at as well, looking for efficiencies. That was the word from the province. So again, my hope is that through those reviews, we will be able to push things back to the province and say, here's some efficiencies that we can find in a number of different areas, but we need your help. So that would be one of them. Who else? I saw another card. Councillor Wells.
Somewhat, I guess, a facetious question, but I guess in terms of putting pressure to the provincial government to deal with some of these issues, what are the implications if we deny their levy, or at the very least take it back to last year's levy? What are the implications of that?
And I would look to Jocelyn. Are we required as a municipality to pay the capital levy, or is that an option?
No, my understanding is we are required to pay the capital levy, and what is available to us is the ability to appeal to the tribunal if we have concerns about the allocation and the amount that we are being charged, but we are required to pay the levy.
Councillor Wells?
And to take it to the tribunal would cost us more than the difference in the increase by far. So you're caught between a rock and a hard place, and I think the public needs to know that we're not making some of these decisions based on our own situation. We're simply making, I guess, endorsing decisions that we have no say over, and that's hard to take.
Agreed. Councillor Belanger?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to comment that, I think sometimes we don't have a great understanding of the work. I know some members of council have been much more involved, but, some of the very hot topics globally is, the environmental crisis, that global warming, and we talked at length about our water, and certainly some of the work that is done does have an impact, like we've seen recently where we've had a significant die-off of wildlife, which I don't fully understand, but there's a lot of things that they may not be as tangible in our mind, the benefits of some of these things, but I think it's one of the things that we need to have a better understanding, and even within our budget, I know that within public works and some of the infrastructure we build and preparing for weather events and these types of things, we don't always do a very great job at communicating to our residency of the work we are doing. But some of the things that that we probably need to look at going forward is the investment on things that do reduce carbon, that pay a return over time. Like, very few of our buildings are using any kind of solar power assist. And, is that something we should be looking at a building at a time? Or, whatever. Again, I think when it comes to the NVCA and some of the environmental work that's done, we don't always fully understand or have tangible benefits that we see in the short term, but it could be still very important. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just comment on that to say that as someone who is quite familiar, I was the chair. I've dealt with the Conservation Authority on a personal level through development, and for $250,000 that we are paying to them every year, we could do amazing things here in our community. Unfortunately, we have to give it there, and I think that there's a whole lot of efficiencies and things that could be happening there. So hopefully we'll see some of those changes in the future. But back to the budget request, the levy. I've read the motion. Is there's any other comments, questions? All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 4.2 is a report, recreation events and facilities, customer service coordinators report. And I believe we have Chris Britton with us to speak to this. Oh, there he is. Both Chris's, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Chris, did
Go
you
ahead.
have anything specifically to say to this, or do you want me to go ahead?
No, I just wasn't sure if there was anything further that you wanted to add to it. We have the report, we have the motion, but I can just open it up if there's any comments or questions from council members.
Yeah, I'm happy to open it up for council.
Okay, Councillor Foster, did I see your card?
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. I got reading the second amendment, or the second resolution, which is also by him. So I'm good with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I support this, and I don't think we fully understand the impact that COVID has had on youth yet, on mental health and, even social skills or social isolation. But I know that there's some other groups that have requested support from council, and I wouldn't want us to just hone in on specific groups or specific activities. I think that if we support this, then if other youth groups or youth programs come forward for similar support, that we need to be prepared to offer that support. Thank you.
Okay, I thought I saw another card. Oh, Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Worship. I will be brief. I support it. I think it's a good initiative. I think they're heading in the right track of making that kind of subsidy available to minor hockey and that. But further to Councillor Belanger's comment, I know in a previous meeting we were looking at helping out our brownies, I believe, or possibly. So I think it's in the works from staff to bring out some kind of a report, I hope, where we can not necessarily pay everything, but at least help out where we can help out and make these groups viable for our youth. Because further, social and mental health is important, and if they're not getting out and doing play, then they're not getting that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have a motion here. Resolved that the Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee recommend to Council that the town provide an ice use subsidy to Wasaga Beach Minor Hockey and the Wasaga Beach Figure Skating Club, consisting of a 21% discount for all ice purchased instead of the current annual fixed lump sum. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Kinney and Councillor Watson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. The next report is also by Chris, 4.3. I'll read the motion. Resolved that whereas it is an accepted practice for the town to renew facility permits based on prior calendar year bookings and to provide consistent permit, payment, and refund practices administered by the Recreation Events and Facilities Department. And whereas it is important to establish these practices as council approved policies, Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee recommend to Council to approve the facility allocation policy as presented, and further that the Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee recommend to Council to approve the recreation events and facilities refund policy as presented. If I could have a mover and seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Bray and Councillor Foster, is there any discussion or comments or questions for either Chris? Councillor Foster?
Sorry, just looking at this policy. Again, I think it's timely considering that we're going to have a modification in facilities coming forward, and hopefully it's going to be lead to hundreds and hundreds of extra bookings and all that. So I commend staff for getting ahead of it and making sure that we have something that's tangible going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other cards, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you both Chris's. Item 4.4 is another one that I think we should do after we have the in-camera session. So I'll look for someone to move and second to move into closed session. Councillor Foster and Councillor Kinney resolve that pursuant to Section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, the next portion of the November 10th, 2021 Committee of the Whole budget meeting will move into closed session to discuss personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. All those in favor? And that is carried. And we'll just give it a couple of minutes to make sure we're in camera.
We're live, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now back in open session. I will go back to item 3.3. I'll read the motion first. The Director of Finance and Treasurer will be in attendance to present the department program draft 2 budgets. Resolved that Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee received the 2022 budget draft 2 update for information, and further that committee authorized staff to advertise the public meeting scheduled to be held on December 14th, 2021, where the proposed 2022 operating and capital budgets, along with the 4-year operating forecast and 10-year capital forecast, will be presented, taking into consideration any direction given at this meeting. Mover, seconder, any amendments? We'll go to Mr. CAO as I see your card's gone up.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So with respect to proceeding to prepare draft 3, staff would appreciate direction from council or committee with respect to a potential tax rate increase that they would be prepared to accept. Right now, the municipal portion is at 3.59, and the blended is at 2.61. So focusing on the municipal portion, it will obviously reduce the blended. If council could give us a target or a range, that would help in terms of going back and reviewing the budget in preparation for draft number 3, which will be presented to council in early December. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wells.
I'll simply say that I was hoping to achieve a budget increase of less than 3%. I won't define the range, but a less than 3%.
Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Wells. That's where I'm sitting right now. Somewhere in the 2.9 range would be something I'd be able to look at. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, Your Worship, we do have to take into account we're a growing municipality. I would, around 3 would be fine, but I'm certainly willing to, staff are not, this isn't a great wish list. They're working on it. So if it is a bit over 3, I'm okay with that. But somewhere in and around that range between 2.95, 3.15, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so I'm from what I'm hearing, if we kept it at the 3% range, Mr. CAO, is that what you're?
Sounds good, Your Worship. I think I heard 2.90 to 3, somewhere in that range. That gives us a target, and we'll aim for that. Thank you.
Okay, so I've read the motion. I have not put a mover and seconder to it. So the same motion, would we like to see it say a range of 2.9 to 3.1? See Councillor Kinney saying yes, so you're going to move that motion.
I would like to see it under 3.
Okay, we can put it to under 3. I think Councillor Foster had said 3.1, but if we can go with under 3, I think most of us could be okay with that. Councillor Foster?
Your Worship, am I live there? Yeah, Your Worship. Again, we can completely hamstring staff. If we've had that discussion, staff have received that. Your final sentence says something to do with any changes we've made in the meeting, so that's covered. So again, I mean, if we say arbitrarily 3, it could, you could get that by cutting a fire truck or cutting something really important. So I think staff have to justify every penny they're asking for, and that's all we're saying. So if we say it can't be above 2.95, then we could be missing something important. So I think if we go with staff deal with the direction we've given them, and then they justify it.
Okay, Mr. CEO, if we leave off the percentage, stay with the original motion based on taking into consideration direction given at this meeting, is that enough direction for you and staff to bring something back?
Your worship, yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, back to the motion I read, moved by Councillor Kinney wants to speak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I learned a long time ago, don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. But that's my comment.
And did I see another card go up? No. Oh, are you voting, Councillor Blanchet?
I think you were looking for a mover and a seconder. I was.
So, I think I had Councillor Kinney. Are you still okay to move this? Okay, seconded by Councillor Blanchet. I've read the motion. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 4.4. The motion reads, resolve that Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee recommend to Council that it approve the creation of a full-time manager of planning position and that committee authorize staff to begin the process to fill the position upon committee approval. Further, that Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee recommend to Council that it approve the conversion of the zoning administrator position to a planner position and authorize the Director of Planning and Economic Initiatives to fill the position upon committee approval. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Blanchet and Councillor Kinney, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Item 6.1, resolve the Committee of the Whole receive the materials provided by the Director of Finance and Treasurer in closed session for information. If I can have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kinney and Councillor Wells, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And just for the public who may be watching, we did pass a motion to extend past our 10 o'clock deadline. So we did do that while in closed session, which allowed us to finish off tonight's meeting. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.